We were celebrating my mother's 63rd birthday and Mother's Day on the same Sunday, because that was how she'd wanted it for as long as I could remember. One cake, one reservation, one afternoon. She said splitting them felt greedy, and my mother had a way of saying things like that with a small shrug that ended the conversation before you'd realized she'd started it. Before the story continues, I want to know something. Where are you right now while listening to this? Are you alone? Or just passing time? And if you have a story idea, or want to see yourself inside one of these survival stories, leave a comment with your name. I might pick it for the next one. All right, let's begin the story. The restaurant was a place called Bevel and Oak, in a converted brick warehouse 3 blocks off the river. White tablecloths, exposed beams, a long zinc bar that caught the light from the front windows and threw it back across the room in soft, broken strips. We had the corner booth by the kitchen pass because my sister Renata had called 4 weeks ahead and asked for it specifically. The booth seated 8 comfortably. We were 9, with the high chair pulled in at the end for Renata's son. I remember thinking, when we sat down, that the room sounded the way a good room sounds. That low, layered hum of 200 people eating and talking, glasses clicking, a waiter laughing somewhere near the bar, a child somewhere behind us asking the same question 3 times. The hostess wore a lavender dress because the manager had asked all the front-of-house staff to wear something soft for Mother's Day. There were small vases of stock and ranunculus on every table. Someone had put one in front of my mother's seat without saying anything, and she'd noticed, and her mouth had done that thing where she was pleased, but didn't want to make it a moment. My name is Theo. I am 34 years old. I work in commercial insurance, which is a job that does not prepare you for anything except for reading paperwork carefully. And I will tell you in advance that nothing I did that afternoon was heroic. I want that on the record before I start, because the story I'm about to tell has been mistold in my head for almost a year now, and I want to set it down the way it actually happened. We had ordered before it started. My mother had the Eggs Benedict because she always had the Eggs Benedict and she made a point of not pretending otherwise. Renata had the salmon. My brother-in-law Davis had the steak frites. My nephew, who was 2, had a small dish of buttered noodles that he was rearranging into a circle on his tray. My Aunt Pris had ordered champagne and orange juice and was already on her second. My cousin Bran was there with his girlfriend, whose name I had only learned that morning and which I am embarrassed to say I cannot now remember. I want to say it began with an E. And there was my mother's friend Lou, who had been her friend since before I was born, and who always wore a man's wristwatch with the face turned to the inside of her wrist. The waiter was a young guy, maybe 23, with a careful side part and a small bandage on the side of his neck just under the jaw. He'd introduced himself as Peter. He said it with a slight emphasis, like he was used to people getting it wrong. I noticed the bandage because my mother had asked him, kindly, if he'd cut himself shaving, and he'd laughed and said something about a cat, and she'd said she had a cat once that took a piece out of her wrist when she was changing its water, and Peter had nodded and gone away to put in our drink order. The bandage was small and white and clean. There was nothing about it that should have meant anything. I will tell you now that I think about that bandage almost every day. The food came out in waves the way it does in good restaurants. The apps first, then a pause, then the entrees in a coordinated drop by 3 runners at once, so that nobody at the table had to watch anyone else eat. My mother was talking to Lou about a movie they had both seen and disagreed about. Renata was cutting Davis's steak into smaller pieces and feeding bites to my nephew off her own fork, while Davis pretended not to notice. Pris was on her 3rd mimosa. Bran's girlfriend was laughing at something my mother had said and putting her hand on Bran's forearm in that way people do when they want to be folded into a family quickly. It was, I want to say, a good half hour, maybe 40 minutes. I want to be honest that for a stretch of that afternoon, I was as happy as I have been in years, and I didn't know it. And I will probably spend a long time trying to forgive myself for not knowing it. The first thing I noticed was the sound of a glass breaking near the bar. That was not unusual. Glasses break in restaurants. There is a particular rhythm to it, the small, high crash, the half-second of silence while the room registers it, then the polite resumption of noise as people look back at their plates. I heard the glass, and I waited for the resumption, and the resumption didn't come. What came instead was a man's voice, low and wrong, the kind of sound you make when you are trying to say a word and your mouth isn't cooperating. I looked over. A man at the bar, mid-50s, gray suit, was bent over the zinc with his hands flat on it and his head down. The bartender was leaning across the bar toward him, asking if he was okay, and the man wasn't answering. He was making that sound. It was not quite a moan. It was more like the sound of someone trying to clear their throat and failing. I watched the bartender reach for the man's shoulder. I watched the man's head come up. I want to describe his face, and I have been trying for almost a year now to find the right words for it, and I cannot. His eyes were open, and they were not seeing the bartender. His mouth was open, and there was a thin string of saliva from his lower lip to the bar. He was looking at the bartender's hand on his shoulder, the way a dog looks at a piece of meat. And then he moved, and the movement was not the movement of a 55-year-old man in a suit. He came across the bar. The bartender went down behind it. I heard a sound from behind the bar that I am not going to describe. The room registered it in stages. The tables closest to the bar stood up first. A woman in a green dress shrieked and dropped the glass, and the glass broke, and her husband grabbed her by the elbow and pulled her toward the door. The tables further away turned their heads, then half stood, then froze. The hostess at the front, in her lavender dress, was looking toward the bar with a phone halfway to her ear. I was already moving. I don't remember deciding to move. I was on my feet with my hand on my mother's shoulder, and I was saying her name. Mom. Mom. She looked up at me, her fork halfway to her mouth, and she said, Theo, what? We need to go, I said. Right now. All of us. Up. Stand up. Renata, who is 2 years younger than me and who reads situations faster than I do, was already lifting my nephew out of the high chair. Davis was on his feet with his napkin still tucked into his collar, which he tore out and dropped on the floor. Lou was reaching for her purse. Chris was saying, What? What's happening? What's happening? And Bran was looking at me with his mouth slightly open, because Bran was a person who waited to be told things. Move, I said. To the back, through the kitchen. I said it because the front door was already wrong. I could see it from where we were. The man in the suit was off the bar and into the room now, and a woman 2 tables away had stood up and tried to run toward the front, and he had reached her in 3 steps, and she had gone down, and she was screaming. And other people between us and the door were standing up and pushing each other, and a chair fell over, and a child started crying somewhere I couldn't see. The front door was 150 people away from us through a panicking room. The kitchen door, the swinging service door with the round porthole, was 8 feet from our booth. Kitchen, I said again. Now. My mother stood up. She is a small woman, and she has bad knees, and she stood up. She put her hand on the edge of the table to push off, and she said, My purse. And I said, Leave it. And she left it. That was the first thing she did for me that afternoon, and I want to mark it down, because she was a person who did not leave things behind, ever. And she left her purse on the booth without a second look. Renata had my nephew on her hip. Davis was behind her with his hands out like he was herding her through a doorway. Lou was moving with surprising speed for a woman in her late 60s. Pris was still saying, "What? What?" And Bran's girlfriend, the one whose name I cannot remember, was tugging at Bran's sleeve, and Bran was still looking at the bar. "Bran," I said. "Bran, look at me. The kitchen. Now." He looked at me. His eyes focused. He moved. I pushed through the swinging door first to make sure the kitchen wasn't worse than the dining room. The kitchen was loud the way kitchens always are, but it was also confused. The line cooks were still cooking. The expediter, a heavy-set man with a shaved head and a clipboard, was yelling at someone about a table number. He hadn't heard anything yet, or he had heard it and not registered what it meant. Steam came up off the flat top. A salamander broiler was glowing orange above the line. "There's a man," I said, and I realized I had no idea what to say next. I said, "Something is happening in the dining room. People are getting hurt. There's an exit through the back, yes?" The expediter looked at me like I had walked in to complain about my steak. Then he heard the sound from the dining room behind me, the layered sound of more than one person screaming, and his face changed. "Through there," he said, pointing past the dish pit. "Loading dock. Doors usually propped." "Thank you," I said. I held the swinging door for my family. My mother came through, then Renata with my nephew, then Davis, then Lou, then Pris, then Bran, then his girlfriend. I counted them as they came. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was 9. We were all there. Behind them, before the door swung shut, I saw the dining room. I want to describe what I saw, because I have not told anyone exactly what I saw, and I think writing it down might be the only way to make it stop replaying. The man in the suit was on the floor next to the woman he'd reached first, and he was not getting up, because 2 other men, customers from neighboring tables, had tackled him. That was a good thing, the kind of thing strangers do for each other, and I want to give those 2 men credit for it, because they probably didn't survive the next 10 minutes. But the woman on the floor next to them, the one he'd reached, the one who'd been screaming, had stopped screaming, and she was sitting up. And her face was wrong in the same way the man's face had been wrong. She stood up. She looked around the room, and then she went for the nearest person, who was an older woman 2 tables over with a walker. The swinging door shut. I turned away from it. "Move," I said. "Move, move, move." The kitchen had a back hallway past the dish pit that ran along the building's outside wall. The expediter had pointed to it. The line cooks were starting to clock what was happening now. One of them, a young woman with a tattoo on her forearm, had pulled out her phone and was filming the swinging door. And I wanted to shake her and tell her to run, but I did not have the time. The hallway smelled like bleach and dish soap. The dish pit machine was hissing. We went past it in a single line, my mother's hand in mine. She was breathing hard. I could feel her pulse in her fingertips. "You're doing great, Mom," I said. "Just keep moving." "Where's Lou?" she said. I looked behind me. Lou was there, right behind Pris, her purse clutched against her chest with both hands. "She's behind you," I said. "She's right behind you." "Okay," my mother said. "Okay." The hallway opened into a small staging area, with stainless steel shelving and 2 big rolling racks of bread. There was a door at the end with a push bar and a red exit sign over it. The expediter had been right. There was also a guy at the door, a young guy in a dishwasher's apron, and he was standing in front of it with his hands up. "Don't," he said. "Don't go out there." "What?" I said. "Don't go out there," he said again. He had an accent I couldn't place, something Eastern European maybe. "It's worse outside." "What do you mean, worse?" Davis said behind me. Davis is 6'2" and used to play college rugby, and his voice when he is scared comes out sounding angry, which I have always thought is a useful thing. "There are people," the dishwasher said. "On the dock. 3, 4. They were on the dock when I came out from my break. They were not okay." "Define not okay," I said. He shook his head. He didn't have the English for it. He just shook his head. I went to the door, and I put my face to the small, wire-reinforced window in it, and I looked out. The loading dock was a concrete pad about 15 feet deep, with 2 dumpsters against the far wall and a steel staircase down to the alley. There were 4 bodies on it. 3 were on the ground, not moving. 1 was standing up. The standing one was a delivery driver in a brown uniform, and he was bent over one of the ones on the ground, and what he was doing was not delivering anything. I stepped back from the window. "He's right," I said. "We can't go out this way." "Theo," my mother said. "Theo, what is happening?" "I don't know, Mom," I said. "I really don't know." I want to tell you that I had a plan at this point. I did not. I had a kitchen full of people who hadn't fully registered yet what was happening on the other side of the swinging door. A back exit blocked by something I didn't have a word for, and 8 people I loved standing in a service hallway between the 2. The expediter came around the corner from the kitchen at a run. "Front's locked," he said. "Manager locked the front. He shut the gate down." "Why?" Davis said. "Containment, I guess," the expediter said. "I don't know. He shut it. He's at the host stand. He won't open it." "Locked us in," Pris said. Her voice had gone very small. "He locked us in with them." "There's an upstairs," the expediter said. "Office, stockroom, roof access. Door at the back of the kitchen, past the walk-in." I looked at him. He was sweating. He had a cut on his hand that he was holding closed with his other hand, and I did not remember him having a cut on his hand 30 seconds ago. "Show us," I said. He led us back through the kitchen, the long way around the line. The line cooks were not cooking anymore. They were clustered at the swinging door, looking through the porthole, and one of them, the young woman with the tattoo, was crying. I called out to them as we went past. "Come with us," I said. "There's a way up. Come on." 3 of them came. The young woman with the tattoo, an older man in chef's whites with a mustache, and a boy who looked maybe 18 and who was holding a saucepan in his hand like he didn't know what to do with it. The rest of them stayed at the door. I don't know what happened to them. I have looked at the news reports, and I have not been able to identify any of them. The door past the walk-in was a plain gray fire door with a stenciled sign that said, "Staff only." The expediter held it open. I counted my family through it again. Mother, Renata, my nephew Davis, Lou, Pris, Bran's girlfriend. 8. Plus the 3 from the kitchen line, plus the dishwasher who had followed us back from the loading dock, plus the expediter. 14 people, including me. The stairs were narrow and steep, the kind of stairs old buildings have where the treads are 8 inches deep and the rise is 10. My mother went up them with both hands on the railings, 1 step at a time, and Renata went behind her with my nephew braced against her shoulder. And I went behind Renata. And Davis went last, because Davis is the biggest of us, and Davis understood without being told that the last person up the stairs was the most exposed. At the top of the stairs there was a landing and 3 doors. 1 door said office, 1 said stock. The 3rd was a heavy metal door with a push bar that said roof in red paint that had been touched up at least once. The expediter pointed at the office. "Phone's in there," he said. "Landline." We crowded into the office. It was small, maybe 12 by 15, with a metal desk and a wall of file cabinets and a corkboard covered in schedules and OSHA notices. There was one window looking down into the alley with a wire grate over it on the outside. The landline was a beige plastic phone on the desk. The expediter picked it up and held it to his ear, and his face did something I didn't like. "Dead," he said. "My cell," Renata said, fumbling in her pocket. "My cell has signal." Half the room pulled out phones. I pulled out mine. I had 2 bars. I dialed 911, and it rang 4 times, and then a recorded voice said all circuits were busy. "Same," Davis said. "Same," said the chef with the mustache. "Try texting," I said. "Text everyone you can. Tell them where we are. Tell them what's happening." I sat my mother down in the desk chair. She was pale. Her lipstick had smeared at one corner of her mouth, and I almost reached out to fix it before I realized how strange that would be, on this afternoon, in this room. She looked up at me and she said, "Theo, I left my purse." "I know, Mom," I said. "It's okay. We'll come back for it." "My pills are in my purse." I stopped. My mother takes a blood pressure medication twice a day, and a blood thinner once a day, and a statin once a day, and a small white pill for her thyroid that has to be taken in the morning 30 minutes before food. She had taken the morning pills before we left. The afternoon blood pressure pill was in her purse on the booth table in a dining room that I was no longer able to enter. "How long can you go without it?" I said. "I don't know," she said. "A day? Maybe 2? I don't know. The doctor said don't skip." "Okay," I said. "Okay, we have time. Let me think." Renata was watching me. Renata is a nurse practitioner. She works in pediatrics, but she knows more about medication than I do. And she gave me a small look that I read as, "Later. We will talk about this later. Right now, there are other things." "Roof," I said. "The roof opens onto what? Other buildings? A fire escape?" "Fire escape down to the alley," the expediter said. "But the alley's where the dock is. Same problem." "Adjacent roofs?" "Maybe. I've never been up there for that. The building next door is taller. The one on the other side is the same height, I think. I don't know." "Okay," I said. "Davis, Bran, with me. We'll go up and look. Everyone else stay here. Lock this door. Don't open it for anyone you don't see through the gap." "There's no gap," the chef said. "Solid door." "Then don't open it at all until I knock 4 times. 4, count it. Then a pause, then 2 more. "Theo," my mother said. "I'll be right back," I said. "I promise." I shouldn't have promised. I knew when I said it that I shouldn't have, but she needed to hear it, and I needed to say it. And we both pretended together that it was a promise that could be kept. Davis and Bran came with me. The roof door pushed open onto a flat tar and gravel surface, with a small parapet around the edge, and a metal box for the HVAC unit humming in the middle. The sun was bright. The sky was a flat, clean blue. There were 2 pigeons on the parapet, and they didn't move when we came out. The building next door, to the west, was about 8 feet taller than ours, brick, with no obvious way up. The building to the east, an old 3-story with a faded painted ad on the side, was about the same height as ours, but separated from us by a 6-foot gap. There was a low parapet on the other side, too. A man could make that jump. A woman in her 60s with bad knees could not. "Theo," Davis said. "I see it," I said. We went to the front of the building and looked down into the street. The street was bad. Not as bad as I'd feared, but bad. There were people running. There were cars stopped in the middle of the intersection with their doors open. There was a city bus pulled across the crosswalk at an angle. There were figures moving the wrong way through the running people. I saw one of them catch a man by the shoulder and pull him down, and I looked away. "We can't go down to the street," Brand said. "No," I said. "We can't jump to the other building." "Mom can't, no." "So what?" I looked at the roof. I looked at the HVAC unit. I looked at the parapet. I looked back at the gap between our building and the building to the east, and I noticed something I hadn't seen the first time. There was a maintenance ladder bolted to the side of the east building, the kind that runs up the brick from a fire escape landing to the roof, and the top 3 rungs of it stuck up above the roof line on our side of the gap. If you could get something to bridge the gap, you wouldn't have to jump. You could crawl. "The kitchen has those long stainless steel prep tables," I said. 8 feet long, maybe, on wheels. "You want to bring up a prep table," Davis said. "I want to bring up 2. Davis looked at me. Then he looked at the gap. Then he looked at the ladder. Then he nodded. We went back down. I want to skip over the next part because it was the worst part, and because nothing I did in it deserves to be described as competent. But I'm trying to tell this straight, so we told the people in the office the plan. The chef and the dishwasher and the expediter agreed to come down with us. We left Renata and Lou and Pris and Brand's girlfriend, and my mother and the boy with the saucepan in the office. The young woman with the tattoo, the line cook, said she'd come too, which surprised me. 6 of us went down to the kitchen. We could hear the dining room through the swinging door. The dining room sounded different now. It was quieter, but not in a good way. There were still sounds. They were not the sounds of a dining room. The prep tables were against the wall by the walk-in. They were heavy, stainless steel on locking casters, and the casters did not roll well on the rubber kitchen mats. Davis and the chef took the first one. The expediter and the dishwasher took the second. The line cook with the tattoo and I went ahead to clear the path through the kitchen and up the narrow stairs, which was the worst part because the stairs were not designed for prep tables, and the tables had to come up on their sides, and that meant tilting them, and tilting them meant noise. I want to say something about the line cook. Her name was Mireille. She told me her name as we were going up the stairs with the second table, and she said it twice because I didn't catch it the first time. She had a tattoo on her right forearm of a small bird, a swift maybe, in black ink. She was maybe 25. She did not panic the entire time. When the prep table got stuck on a corner of the stair landing, she was the one who figured out which way to tilt it. When the chef hurt his back trying to lift, she was the one who took his end. I am writing her name down because I have not been able to find her since, and I have looked. And writing her name might be the only thing I can still do for her. We got both tables up to the roof. Davis and the chef extended the first one across the gap, slid it out slow over the parapet, and dropped the far end onto the parapet of the east building. It hit with a clang that we all flinched at. The table was 8 feet long. The gap was 6. It bridged with a foot of overlap on each side. The second table we laid next to the first, side by side, doubling the width. 2 prep tables wide, 3 feet across. A small bridge. Davis went first. He crawled, not walked. The tables flexed slightly under his weight, but they held. He got to the other side and stood up and waved. I went back down to the office. I knocked 4, paused, 2. The chef opened the door. "It's ready," I said. "We have a way." I got my mother up. She was shaking. I told her about the bridge, and her eyes got large, and she said, "Theo, I cannot crawl across a table over an alley." "You can," I said. "I will be on one side of you. Renata will be on the other. We will hold you the whole way. You will not look down. You will look at my hand. Okay? Okay, she said. She did not believe me. She came anyway. We moved everyone up to the roof in a line. My nephew was the easiest in a way. Renata strapped him to her chest with a folded apron the chef gave her, and she crawled across with him pressed flat against her, and he didn't cry, which I will never understand. Lou went next, faster than I expected. Pris had to be talked across by Davis from the other side, who used a voice I had never heard from him before, low and steady, like he was talking down a horse. Bran's girlfriend crossed without a word and then sat down on the other side and put her head between her knees. Bran crossed and threw up over the parapet on the far side. The dishwasher crossed. The expediter crossed. The chef crossed. Mireille was waiting to cross last, behind me, behind my mother, with the boy with the saucepan in front of her. The boy with the saucepan was named, I learned later, Jakob. He was 18. He had been working at the restaurant for 3 weeks. He crossed the bridge on his hands and knees, with the saucepan still in one hand, which made him crawl lopsided. And when he was halfway across, he froze. "Keep going, buddy," I said. "You're almost there. Keep going." He looked back at me. His face was wet. "Drop the pan, Jakob," Mireille said behind me. "Drop the pan and use both hands." He dropped the pan. It hit the alley below us with a sound like a bell. He crawled forward. He got to the other side, and Davis pulled him over the parapet, and he sat down and started to cry. My mother and I were next. I crawled in front of her, backwards, on my hands and knees, with my hands on her wrists. Renata was behind her, on her hands and knees, with her hands on my mother's hips. We moved one set of hands at a time. My mother's eyes were locked on mine. She did not look down. Her lipstick had smeared more, and there was a small white line at the corner of her mouth that I think was dried saliva. "You're doing it, Mom," I said. "You're doing it. One more. One more." "Theo," she said. "Theo, I'm scared." "I know," I said. "I know. Almost there." We got across. Davis pulled her up and over the parapet, and she sat down hard on the gravel of the other roof, and she started to laugh, which was the worst sound she made all day, because it was the laugh of a person whose body had not yet caught up with the fact that they were not going to die in the next 10 seconds. Mireille was the last one. She was halfway across when the door to our roof, the one we'd come out of, opened. A man came out onto our roof. He was wearing a busser's apron and a white shirt, and he had blood on his front. His face was the same wrong as the man at the bar. "Mireille," I said. "Mireille, move." She moved. She was faster than the others had been. She got halfway across the last 3 feet before the man on the other roof saw her, and then he was at the parapet and he was on the bridge. The prep tables did not hold his weight. Or they would have held his weight, but he did not crawl. He ran. He took 3 steps and the tables tilted, both of them, sliding sideways under his momentum, and Mireille was lifted with them, and she went over. I don't want to describe what I saw next. I will say only that she did not scream on the way down. The man went down with her. The tables went down after them. They hit the alley together, and the sound was something I cannot put into a sentence. Davis caught me by the back of my shirt because I had started forward without realizing it. He pulled me back. He said my name. He said it 3 times before I heard him. "Theo," he said. "Theo. There's nothing. There's nothing. Theo." "She got us across," I said. "I know." "She got everybody across." "I know." My mother was crying. Renata was holding her. Lou was holding Renata. Pris had her hands over her mouth. Bran's girlfriend, the one whose name I never got, was sitting against the parapet with her eyes closed. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough that the expediter came over and put his hand on my shoulder and said we needed to keep moving. "Where?" I said. "Down," he said. "Through this building. To the street on the other side. The other side of the block. It might be better. Or it might be worse." "Yeah," he said. "It might be worse." We went down through the east building. It was a residential building with apartments above a furniture store. The roof access door was unlocked. The stairwell was empty. We went down 4 flights and we did not see a single person, which was strange and which I did not have time to think about. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a metal door that led out onto the street, the back street, the one parallel to the one with the restaurant. I stopped everyone before I opened it. "I'm going to look first," I said. "Stay back." I cracked the door. The street was quieter than the front of our building. There were 3 cars stopped at odd angles, but the doors were closed. There was a woman walking down the sidewalk with a child in her arms, just walking, not running, which I found more frightening than if she'd been running. There were no figures on this side of the street that I could identify as the wrong kind. "It looks okay," I said. "Move. Stay together. Stay close to the buildings. We're going to find a car, or we're going to find a police officer, or we're going to find something. Just move." We moved. 11 of us after Mireille. My mother in the middle. Renata with my nephew. Davis at the back. The chef and the expediter and the dishwasher and Jacob and Lou and Pris and Bran's girlfriend stretched in a line along the wall. I want to tell you about the next 40 minutes because they were 40 minutes and they felt like 4 hours. But I will compress them because the important parts came at the end. We got 2 blocks. We had to backtrack once when a group of figures came around a corner and we ducked into a dry cleaner's whose door was unlocked and whose owner was hiding behind the counter and who let us hide there for 10 minutes before she made us leave because she said her son was coming for her in a truck and she didn't want a crowd in the shop when he arrived. I understood her. I did not blame her. We left. We got to a small park, a green square the size of half a city block, with benches and a fountain and a few trees. The park was empty. We sat down on the benches. My mother was gray. Her hands were trembling. Renata took her pulse and looked at me and didn't say anything, but I read her face. "Mom," I said, "how are you doing?" "I'm fine," she said. "I'm fine. I just need to sit." "Renata." "Her pressure's probably up," Renata said quietly. "She needs to take it easy. She needs water. She needs her medication eventually. Not right this second, but soon." I nodded. I want to tell you about what happened next, because it is the part of the afternoon I have thought about more than any other part, and I am still not sure I made the right call. The expediter, whose name I had finally learned was Merrick, came over to me and sat on the bench next to mine. He had been holding his cut hand the whole time. The cut hand was wrapped in a bar towel now. The bar towel was red. "Theo," he said. "Yeah. I have to tell you something." I looked at him. He had a strange expression. It was not quite fear. It was something closer to apology. "My hand," he said. "Your hand." It was Peter. I didn't understand for a second. Then I did. "The waiter," I said. "He came back into the kitchen before the man at the bar. Maybe 10 minutes before. He was sweating. He said he didn't feel well. I told him to take a break. He went to the back. to the dish pit. He was leaning on the dish pit. I went back to check on him because he had been gone too long, and he was, I don't know how to say. He turned around, and he had his teeth on me before I even saw his face. I looked at his hand. The towel was very red. "How long ago?" I said. "Before you came into the kitchen. Maybe a minute? Maybe 2?" I did the math. It had been almost an hour. "You're still you," I said. "I am still me," he said. "But." He didn't say but. He didn't have to. He sat there on the bench with his red hand wrapped in a red towel, and he looked at me with that apologetic expression, and I understood what he was telling me. The bandage on Peter's neck, the small, clean white bandage that my mother had asked about, had not been from a cat. Peter had been bitten before his shift. Peter had come to work bitten. Peter had served us our drinks bitten. Peter had turned in the dish pit. The man at the bar had not been the first. The man at the bar had been the second, or the third, or the fourth. The dining room had not been infected from the outside. The dining room had been infected from inside, from the back, from the kitchen, from a young man with a careful side part who had bandaged his neck and gone into work because he needed the shift. I sat with that for a long time. Merrick sat with me. "I'm not going to make it to wherever we're going," he said. "I can feel it." "You don't know that." "I know. I can feel it. My fingers are wrong. My mouth is dry in a way I have not felt before. Merrick, I am telling you so that you can decide what to do." I looked across the park at my mother on the other bench. She had her eyes closed. Lou was holding her hand. Renata was holding my nephew. Davis was standing up watching the street with his arms crossed. Pris was crying quietly. Bran's girlfriend had her head on Bran's shoulder. "I'm going to walk that way," Merrick said, pointing across the park away from us. "I am going to sit down on that bench over there. You are going to give me 5 minutes, and then you are going to move your people the other way." "Merrick. Theo, please." I looked at him. "Do you have anyone?" I said. "Anyone I can call? Anyone I can find? If we make it?" He thought about it. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "Not anymore. Just my mother, and she is in Gdansk, and she will not understand, and I would rather she did not know." "Okay. Okay." He stood up. He walked across the park. He sat down on a bench under a tree on the far side. He did not look back. I watched him sit there for about a minute, and then I turned back to my family, and I said, "We're moving. Now. This way." "Where's the kitchen guy going?" Davis said. "He's not coming with us." Davis looked at me. He understood. He nodded once. "Up," he said to the others. "We're up. Let's go." I want to tell you what happened to Merrick, and I cannot, because I do not know. I told myself for weeks that he had sat down and that something had happened quickly. I told myself that he had gone peacefully or that he had not gone at all. I have no way of knowing. I left him on a bench in a park because he asked me to, and I have not stopped thinking about whether asking was enough. We walked 4 more blocks. We saw 3 more of the wrong kind people, and we avoided 2 of them. And the third one, Davis hit with a piece of rebar he picked up from a construction site we passed. And I will not describe that either, because Davis is my brother-in-law, and the man who saved my nephew that afternoon, by being willing to do things I was not willing to do. And his privacy is more important than the story. We found a fire truck. That is how it ended for us that day. We found a fire truck stopped at an intersection with 3 firefighters around it, and a paramedic loading a woman on a stretcher. One of the firefighters saw us coming and put up his hand and asked if anyone was bitten, and I said no, and Renata said no, and I looked at Davis, and Davis looked at his hand, where he had scraped his knuckles on the rebar, and he said no. The firefighter looked at us a long time. Then he nodded and waved us to the truck. They were running people to a triage point at the hospital 8 blocks east. They could take 7. We were 10. "Take her first," I said, pointing at my mother. "And the baby, and my sister, and Lou, and Pris, and Bran, and his girlfriend." "That's 7. "Yeah." "What about you?" "There are 3 more of us. We'll come behind you. We'll walk." "It's not safe to walk." "I know." The firefighter looked at me. He was maybe 40, with gray in his mustache, and he looked at me the way Merrick had looked at me on the bench, and he said, "I can come back, if we can. I will try. That's all I'm asking." My mother heard. She turned around with one foot on the truck step and she said, Theo, you come with us." "Mom, there's not room." "You come with us." "There's not room, Mom. I'll walk. I'll be right behind." "Theo." "Mom, look at me." She looked at me. "I am going to walk 8 blocks, I said. "I'm going to walk with Davis and Jakob and the dishwasher, and we are going to walk 8 blocks, and I'm going to meet you at the hospital. Okay?" "Tell Renata to give you water. Tell her to keep you sitting down. I am going to walk 8 blocks, and I am going to find you. Tell me you hear me." "I hear you," she said. "Tell me you believe me." She didn't answer. "Mom." "I believe you, Theo." She didn't believe me. I didn't believe me. We both said it anyway. The truck pulled away. I stood in the intersection, and I watched it go, and I watched my mother's face in the small back window of the cab, and her hand was up against the glass, and then the truck turned, and she was gone. Davis was next to me. Jakob was behind Davis. The dishwasher, whose name I learned right then was Andre, was behind Jakob. 8 blocks, Davis said. 8 blocks. We started walking. I am going to tell you about the 8 blocks, because the 8 blocks are where I want to stop the story. And I want to stop the story in a place where I do not yet know what I will find at the hospital. Because at the time, I did not know. And the version of me who walked those 8 blocks is the version I want you to meet, and not the version who arrived. The first block was empty. We walked down the middle of the street with our hands open and visible, like we were trying to surrender to someone, except there was no one to surrender to. The sun was going down a little. The light was coming in low and orange between the buildings, and it was hitting the shop windows on the east side of the street, and the windows were throwing the light back at us in slabs. The second block was bad. There were 4 of the wrong kind people in the middle of it, around a stalled car, doing something to a body on the ground. We went up the side street and around. Davis had the rebar. Jakob had picked up a broken-off chair leg from somewhere. Andre had nothing. I had my hands and a key ring with my apartment key on it, and that was all. The third block had a dog. A medium-sized brown dog, just standing in the middle of the sidewalk, alive, with a collar on, watching us go past. It did not bark. It did not move. I have thought about that dog more times than I can count. The fourth block had a man on his porch with a shotgun. He pointed it at us as we came up the street. He did not say anything. We stopped, and we held up our hands, and we kept our hands up, and we walked slow, sideways, past his house. And he tracked us with the barrel the whole way. And when we were past his house, I let my hands down, and I realized my legs were shaking. The fifth block was the one where Jacob sat down. He sat down on the curb in front of a coffee shop. He was breathing hard. He had not said a word the whole walk. He sat down on the curb, and he put the chair leg next to him, and he put his hands over his face, and he started to sob. "Jacob," I said. "I can't," he said. "You have to." "I can't, I can't, I can't." I sat down next to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. The shoulder was thin. 18 years old, 3 weeks at the restaurant, his first real job probably, and he was sitting on a curb in a city where the sun was going down and the streets had stopped being streets. "Listen to me," I said. "Listen. You crawled across that bridge. You did that. You did it with a saucepan in your hand, and you did it scared, and you did it anyway. You can walk 3 more blocks." "That girl," he said. "The cook." "I know." "She told me to drop the pan." "I know." "I should have dropped it sooner." "It's not your fault." "She fell because of the man on the roof." "I know. It's not your fault." He cried for another 30 seconds. Then he wiped his face with his apron, and he picked up the chair leg and he stood up. Davis put a hand on his back and we walked. The 6th block was empty. The 7th block was the parking lot of a Walgreens, which was on fire, which I did not understand and did not stop to understand. The 8th block was the hospital. There was a National Guard truck at the front entrance. There was a line of people behind a folding barricade, and a soldier with a clipboard, and another soldier with a thermometer pointed at people's foreheads. There was a paramedic with a triage kit at a small table. There were ambulances and a fire truck, and the fire truck was the one that had taken my family. I saw it before I saw anything else. I started running. I was not aware of starting. I just ran. Davis ran with me. Jakob and Andre ran behind. I got to the truck and I looked into the cab, and the cab was empty. "They're inside," the firefighter with the gray mustache said. He had come around the back of the truck. He was holding a water bottle. "All 7. They're inside. Triage took them 10 minutes ago." "My mother?" "In the lobby, sitting. I told her you were coming." "Thank you," I said. "You walked 8 blocks." "Yeah." "Anyone bitten in your group?" "No." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He nodded. He stepped aside. I went up the line. The soldier with the thermometer touched it to my forehead and watched a number and waved me through. The other soldier with the clipboard asked me a question I cannot remember, and I answered it, and he waved me through too. I walked into the lobby of the hospital, and my mother was in a folding chair against the far wall, and Renata was next to her, and Lou was next to Renata, and my nephew was asleep in Renata's lap. My mother saw me. She stood up. She crossed the lobby toward me. She was walking faster than she had walked all day. Her face was the face of a woman who had spent the last 20 minutes not breathing, and who was breathing again. She got to me, and she did not say anything. She put both of her hands on my face, the way she used to do when I was a child, and she had something serious to tell me. And she held my face like that for what felt like a long time. And then she pulled my forehead down to hers, and she stayed there. "Theo," she said, "I'm here." "You walked." "I walked." "Don't ever do that again." "Okay, Mom." "Don't ever do that again." "Okay." I want to end the story there. I want to end it with my mother's hands on my face in the lobby of a hospital 8 blocks from a restaurant where I had spent a Sunday afternoon almost being happy. I want to end it before what happened next, which was the lights flickering, which was the soldier at the door shouting something into his radio, which was the paramedic running past us with a stretcher, which was Renata standing up with my nephew and saying my name in a voice I had not heard her use before. I want to end it before the next 8 blocks, which we walked after they evacuated the hospital, and before the school we slept in that night with 200 other people on the gym floor, and before what happened to Lou 3 days later, and before the long, ugly month after that. I want to end it with her hands on my face. But I have to tell you the last thing, because the last thing is the thing I came here to tell you. The last thing is that I asked her, in the lobby, before the lights flickered, before any of the rest of it, I asked her if she was okay, if her chest was okay, if her hands were okay, if she needed anything. And she said, "Theo, I'm fine. I just want my purse." And I said, "I know, Mom. I know." And she said, "It had your father's picture in it." I had forgotten that. My father has been dead for 11 years. She kept a small photograph of him in the zip pocket of her purse, behind her library card. I had seen it 100 times. I had not thought of it once in the restaurant, in the kitchen, on the stairs, on the roof, on the bridge, in the park, on the 8 blocks. I said, "I'm sorry, Mom." She said, "It's okay. It's just a picture. I have him in my head." She said it like it didn't matter. She said it like a person who had already done the work of letting it go, somewhere on the back of a fire truck, somewhere on a bench in a park where she sat with her eyes closed while I watched a man named Merrick walk away to die. And I understood, standing there in the lobby of that hospital, with my mother's hands coming down off my face and finding mine, that I had spent the entire afternoon trying to save the version of her that wouldn't have been able to leave the picture. And she had already let it go. She had let it go in the booth when I said leave the purse, and she had stood up without it. She had been ahead of me the entire time. The lights flickered. The soldier shouted. Renata stood up. I held my mother's hand, and we moved.